Well, this morning we're going to continue our series called Our Album Together. And it's a series a little bit about vision. We've been using some of our lectionary texts the last 2 weeks. It's a series to kind of dive in, talk about where we are as a church, maybe a little bit about where we can be in the future, talk about where God perhaps has called us to be. And week number 1, we talked about using this metaphor as an album. I just really want to have an album that's just full of joy. I mean, who collects an album if the pictures aren't like mainly good, happy, fun, joyful pictures? I mean, there's no purpose of looking back at that album if they're not mainly, by and large, have joy scattered through there. And I want us to have joy together and have these pictures of joy together. And one of my things to understand is to have that joy, it's about having that binding. We said that Christ is our binding. And sometimes we're like loose pages. But Christ binds us up. But not only binds us, but calls us outward to do ministry. And as a church, that's where we kind of begin. Last week was the sermon you have to throw in. If you're going to talk about an album, there's going to be rough pages. There's going to be hard times. There's going to be those pictures you flip through and you want to ignore them. Or there's pictures that just bring back all of these hard memories. Maybe someone who passed on. It's a broken relationship. Someone who's, a picture that just brings back all this sadness, grief to us. And we need to talk about those times. And we talked about, we used our lectionary passage on the walk to Emmaus, Luke 24. And they were basically, a couple of disciples were walking. And I said, there's something amazing about, it was really a non-rocket scientist sermon. The first thing they did is they walked. They walked together. They had dialogue. And in the midst of that, they saw Christ. So in those rocky, rough times, maybe we're just called to simply walk and move forward. We're supposed to walk with one another. We're supposed to have dialogue with one another. And maybe in the midst of that, Christ will be present. And we're going to have those times as a church. And we just have to recognize we're going to have those pages as a church, as in our personal lives. They're real. You can't get around those pages at all. This morning, I want to share with you just really quickly a kind of a cool album I found. It's a farmer photo album of some of our youth here in the past, the church, FMCC Youth, as it's called in the beginning. If you flip through the pages, there's several pictures from the youth group. You can tell, obviously, they had Bibles out, so they're obviously studying. There's obviously times where they had balls out, and they're like throwing frisbee. I'm not sure if they're playing ultimate frisbee or what, but they're doing some kind of fun activity. You can kind of tell that. There's other times where they're eating. You can obviously tell they're having a good time eating. And then there's a couple of kind of really cool pictures. Ruth, believe it or not, here's yourself again. And the youth, they're singing maybe jingle bells. I don't know what to do. They have bells in their hand. You can tell they're kind of having a fun time. Another picture, I'm not going to call out your farmer pastor. He's riding a bike. It's kind of cool. I'm not quite sure what he's doing there, though. There's other pictures, though, if you go through here. While some of them are kind of straightforward, they're fellowshipping, they're studying, they're at Chuck E. Cheese, believe it or not, at one. They're at the Broadway Palm at one. But there's other pictures, though, you look at, and you really can't tell what they're doing. From an outsider looking, we have sound. God said on the 8th day. But there's other pictures you look at and yet you can't really grasp. Someone from like myself, outsider looking in, I can't really grasp what they're doing. I can't grasp, I can't tell it looks like maybe they're cooking something. I don't know what they're cooking. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know, I don't get it, basically. I don't understand it. And I'm not picking on our youth. I had youth, Oscar had youth. There's different pictures that we do, and from an outsider looking in, you can't get it. You don't understand what the youth were doing. You can't understand those pictures unless you were an insider in those. You were there, maybe. One of those pictures, you had to be there. Is anyone here like family reunions? A couple people? Well, one of the things we do a lot of our family reunions is kind of look at a slideshow. We got a family reunion coming up around the corner. I was thinking about the famous slideshows that might be there. But we also had a slideshow, believe it or not, at my grandmother's funeral afterward, at the reception. And I remember the slideshow kind of going on. And I remember a couple of pictures. In fact, one was actually a video. And those are just great. And there was a video, you could see everyone, we were all in vacationing and I think it was Denver, Colorado, and my littlest cousin, Johnny, he was with all the grown-ups, and they were, because he was just a little kid at the time, he was with all the grown-ups, but I was like, where are all the kids at? Later on, 10 minutes later, looking at the slideshow, 5 minutes later, there's a video of all us other grandkids with Grandma at the house. Granny stayed home at the house. And you know what we were doing? We were like WWE wrestling style, hardcore. And Grandma was just on the couch licking and laughing at us. And we're like, what is going on here? What did we do? What were we thinking? What were we doing? This is kind of weird. This is kind of strange. And Grandma's just sitting there clapping. We're just going at it, beating each other up. Couldn't understand it. There was another picture later on I saw. It was a picture of my great uncle. He had to be at least 70 years old, or excuse me, mid-70s or older. It was a picture in Disney World. It's a Magic Kingdom. Anyone familiar with that place? And there's a picture of myself and my Uncle Bob smiling like this as we got ready to go on the, what ride was that called? The one that goes in the dark at night. What ride, anybody? Space Mountain. It's a roller coaster that's meant to go in the dark, and here we are smiling, Uncle Bob and I. What was I thinking, taking my great Uncle Bob there? Mid-70s. What, were we out of our mind? What were we doing? You couldn't explain this to someone else. And believe it or not, I say all this to get us lined up for our passage. We remember our scripture, they're at a dinner party over at Mary and the brother of Lazarus' house, and they're all sitting down, and Jesus is there with his disciples. And when in fact, they don't just have chairs, but they're sitting down on the floor, kind of reclining. This is just kind of what they did at this time. And anybody here remember what the famous Mary does? Mary basically pulls out this jar, 3/4 full, a pound of this stuff, this perfume, this oil, this ointment. It's incredibly valuable. It's worth a year's wages, and just pours it on Jesus. $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 worth of this stuff, and just pours it on Jesus. I don't know about you. I wouldn't even want that stuff in my hand. I'm afraid I'll drop it, right? Just being realistic. $30,000, $40,000 worth of stuff. This ointment, this perfume. I wouldn't even want that in my hand. But Mary brings this out and pours it on Jesus' feet. And then what does Mary continue on and do? She wipes Jesus' feet, where Jean's pointing, with her hair. She wipes Jesus' feet with her hair. Now there's always a group of people saying, well, Pastor, that's just what they did back in the day. Wrong. They did not do this back in the day. No! They did not at all. This was something new and different. Mary, some people say she was kind of doing like an intimate thing here. This might have made some people in the room uncomfortable, awkward, perceived as a bit strange. What is this woman doing? What is she thinking? Has she lost her mind? Mary's actions might have even made the disciples feel a little bit odd. Keep in mind, the disciples were the ones who followed Jesus. They heard him the most. They've heard Jesus even talk about money. what you're supposed to do with money. Give the money to the poor. About serving the poor with the money. And I'm sure some of the disciples had an issue with what was going on. And we find out that one of them stands up and speaks out. And guess who speaks out? Judas. Judas speaks out. He probably says what it's on the mind of everyone. But he says, why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? Now, I'll be honest. Let's have the truth. Time out. I have trouble with this part of the scripture because I kind of want to agree with Judas. But I know Judas is the bad guy, right? I know he's the bad guy of the story. Those who read this through New Testament eyes, we know he's the bad one. He sells out. He betrays Jesus. In fact, in Scripture, there's just little parentheses that tells us this. It tells us about Judas. But I kind of want to agree almost with him. Well, in a couple of our verses, we find out Judas says, why would you pour out 30? Basically, Judas is saying, why would you pour out $30,000 to $40,000? Why would you pour out all this money? Right here. Judas can't get it. But Jesus says, leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. That's a hard pill to swallow as well. Friends, I don't think Mary did anything at that moment that had anything to do with money. I don't think she was thinking about how much it was worth in denarii. I don't think that was on Mary's mind at the moment. For Mary, she knew it was one of the most precious things that she had in her home. And she wanted to give her very, very best, most precious thing to Jesus. Period. That's why Mary did that. She wanted to offer her very best. You want to call it, in the prayer I just said, extravagant devotion. She wanted to have extravagant worship to Jesus. And she laid it all right there. Mary had that extravagant devotion. She was absolutely compelled to do what she did because she couldn't have if she didn't do it. To just go ahead and pour out something worth a whole year of wages, she must have been pretty compelled to do so. You don't just, well, maybe I should throw away $40,000, do you? She must have been pretty compelled to do so. Nobody just throws away that kind of money. However, she could do this because she was fully focused on Jesus and what Jesus did for her family and what Jesus could do for others. For Mary, she knew who Jesus was. She experienced him. She knew that he was the Messiah. This was the Son of God. This was truly a beautiful, mysterious, holy thing, what Mary did. And you know what? Judas missed out. He didn't see it. He related it all to money. But what Mary did right in front of everybody, she did a beautiful, mysterious, holy thing in front of everybody. But Judas couldn't grasp it. In our lives, as well as in the church, much of what we can do can be measured. It can be measured. We can measure how many people attend worship, how many are being baptized, joining transfer, those who transfer their membership. We can measure, we can count and how many people are homebound members. There's a lot of different ways we measure things in the church. It's good, it's smart, it's very wise to do so. We measure things. But there's also some things in our lives and in the church that can't be measured. They can only be defined as beautiful, mysterious, and holy. You know, Reverend Dale Carson's not here this morning, but I bet you could ask Dale Carson, you could ask Farmer Chaplain Jim Moxley when they worked for Hope Hospice. Could you always measure what they did, their spiritual services that they did at Hope Hospice? Is there really a way to fully measure that? I doubt it. I gave communion, I visited with someone this past week, and is there really a way to just measure that time? No, I walk away, I drive home from my visit thinking, wow, God was present. God was doing something real right here. Not everything we do can be measured. And it may even look funny, look weird. People may scratch their heads and say, I just don't get it. Some people may look at chaplains, I just don't get how you can spend time with someone who's about to maybe pass on. Those who are going, there's enough people in the world, right? But no, there's something incredibly special what chaplains do. There's so many ministries like that others can't fully grasp, but God is present. And we can't ignore those ministries. So part of having an album together is to do some incredible ministry and some things that may not make sense to other people, especially to others outside of these doors. They might say, what's the purpose of starting this ministry or doing this ministry? Why do we give our time for this ministry and get no return? Where's the ROI, return on investment, Zach? Or people might even just say, what are you thinking? Doing something like that. Maybe, just maybe, like my Uncle Bob who decided to go on that roller coaster. We're called just to stand in line and jump on and get ready for an amazing, amazing adventure, a ride, a journey. Looking back, I don't have a clue why he did that, but I bet at that time he was doing it because of his love for me, maybe. Maybe so he could just be with me. Or maybe he didn't even know. He just did it. But that's sometimes part of ministry. Let us